one of the more novel things that we do in the Torrey Honors Institute in our curriculum is we don't just read books, but we also read music. We read music as a text. And I think I'd just like to ask us, is that the right word? Clearly it's a metaphor.
Right.
Is it possible to read music?
Yeah, I think when you talk about reading, often we're thinking about just picking up propositions, right? Propositional content. And when you start talking about something that's fine art, it gets a little bit tricky. There's this great Billy Collins poem that's called Introduction to Poetry. I think poetry has similar problems. So he says, I want my students to dive into a poem and swim around, to poke at it and to fall into it. And all my students want to do is tie it to a chair and beat a confession out of it. And so the idea with music is similar. I think if all we're trying to do is tie it to a chair and beat a propositional confession out of it, I think we're doing it wrong. But that doesn't mean you can't read a text. You've had some experiences with Brahms recently. How did that go?
One of the questions we explored while we were listening to Brahms Requiem in particular is, what is it about music that helps us in the mourning process? Why is that a source of comfort? And what we explored is the way in which music could mirror our emotions, which made me wonder if, one of the things that music offers is it engages with us in a more holistic way of communicating. Because I think of a symphony, I actually like to think that we communicate in terms of symphony, that it is not just our words, but it's our facial expressions, our body language, and you read people. And so I think that's why I think music is in some ways more accessible because it is engaging these kind of wordless ways of communicating.
Nice. Do you think your students, if they had the same piece from Brahms, without any of the words, and also without the title of Requiem, so if they couldn't have placed it in a kind of tradition of reflection, in a liturgical tradition, and even in a life place, would it have been as clear a mirror for them? Would they still have been able to see something in the mirror?
That's a good question. My opening question contextualized it, but I think there's context in Brahms Requiem, particularly with the contrasts that are working. And there are these kind of jarring moments in interesting places that echo the kinds of ways in which our mourning is not simply a straight line, but it is cyclical. So we work through, there's these moments of I've gotten through this, but then I feel this sense of disquiet in my soul as well. So,
I like that it's not maybe so much that music has this sort of communicative power that we should be able to separate from the words, and then that's the real content of the music. I like the way in which Josh is talking about it as this sort of mutual reinforcing and informing between the lyrics and the music, right? Which maybe distinguishes. You could probably still read a musical text without words, but most of the texts that we choose do have words, and there's this sort of informing. I'm thinking about a session that I led on Handel's Messiah, and we're reading the "And we like sheep" passage, which you'd expect sheep. My sort of immediate expectation is, this is going to be pastoral, this is going to be beautiful. It's not. It's a little bit crazy, and it kind of gets away from itself. And you realize that what the passage is, "And we like sheep have gone astray, each one has chosen his own way." And then you get to the moment where Handel gives the lyric, "And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." And this manic, crazy, just wonky music completely cuts out. And it's this beautiful, single, mournful note that's the sort of the coming of Christ in the midst of this crazy having gone astray. And the emotional impact of that, the sort of the full helpfulness of that music to help us understand that passage is extraordinary.
And it's what I like about that is artists rightly complain when the arts are reduced to illustration.
Yeah.
And that's actually not what you're saying. You're not saying, in fact, what's going on there is an imaginative correction.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of it's emotional, so you just called it emotional, but it's not just that either.
Sure,
it's a cognitive thing too, because we think, we like sheep, we have a loving shepherd, it's great.
Yeah.
No, wait a second. I have to look again at this passage, which speaks of the waywardness of sheep. It's a critique of the sheep, and so there is as cognitive a thing as going on as the affective. Joshua, just quickly, you're about to teach a book. A book. There we go again. You're going to teach Coltrane's "A Love Supreme," which has 3 words, I guess: "A love supreme, a love supreme, a love supreme," and a lot of liner notes. are you going to lean into the liner notes? Are you going to try to do it on the basis of the music? You know what you're going to do? I know you're in process about that still.
Well, my first thought is to think that the words are part of the music, that they're not just, here's the music and here are the words, but it's part of the chorus and the way the instruments are communicating. So I think that words themselves are musical. That we can all say the same line, but have different tones and different dynamics going on. So
well, and even going back to the idea that music is like poetry in this way. So I married a poet and discovered that one of the things you have to do when you're writing poetry is think about the musicality of the words themselves, right? That the sound of the word actually is part of the art. So that's got to be true in these musical pieces too.
I wonder though if our ears are trained to hear. I mean, I think that's the challenge. I was teaching George Herbert's poetry this week. Our ears are uniquely untrained for many of us to hear the poetry and to hear the music. So when I get in a room with students, we're all about on the same page when we're reading a literary text. When we're reading a musical text, there's a much bigger gap. And so part of the struggle there is just to kind of catch people up with the kind of rudimentary skills. We got to wrap it up. Okay, thanks.
The Torrey Honors Institute at Biola University. Biblically centered, great books, liberal education. More at biola.edu/Torrey.